Good morning and welcome to Monday Momentum. And I want to share a story. Momentum. I kind of put this together over a cup of coffee this morning. And basically, what I want to talk about is planning. And I talk a lot about planning. However, it's one of those things, and I'm pulling up a couple of notes here. It's one of those things to where if you have plans and contingency plans, you will not lose momentum. Now, let me back up and bring coffee back into it. My coffee maker broke. And if you know me, and a lot of you do, me in the morning without, I don't want to get into a judging competition. Coffee, we'll just leave it at coffee. We'll not talk about the quantity of. I'm not my normal self. And having a few cups of coffee gets me ready for the day. And it's my 5-minute morning. It's going outside and feeling cold air on me and sipping warm coffee that just it energizes me, it grounds me, it helps me start to put together of what I'm going to focus on. And I realize that having a jar of instant coffee in the house, I know it's instant, is a contingency plan. And I was able to go, oh, coffee maker broke. Instant hot water, and I'm back in the game. I didn't lose much momentum, a little bit, because I went, the coffee maker's broke. But it just kept me going. I was able to do a cup of instant. I'm actually on my second. And I just continued with my day, and I will deal with the fact that my coffee maker is no longer functioning later on in the day. So tomorrow morning, there's no misstep. So that jar of instant is my contingency plan. It's there because I'm a planner. I planned ahead for worst case scenarios. So on to today's, what I really want to talk about is what is going on everywhere in the Brian ecosystem. And there's a lot of things going on. And I want to start off with a few things. Today's episode is going to talk about a project that I started a few years ago with Linz Florin of Growth Network Podcasts. And I always screw that up. It's a podcast network. Anyway, he's gonna chastise me later, but we'll deal with that. And what that is a podcast called Feed Drops. And what a feed drop is a podcaster will talk about and drop a feed into their episode. They might even swap whole episodes. So they might do an introduction. Hey, this is Brian coming to you from my podcast. But today we have a special episode. I'm featuring Sally on her podcast. Here's the episode. I'll be back when it's over. And then that episode is played. And then at the end, there's more discussion from the show host. So we dropped their feed, an entire episode or partial episode, usually whole, into our feed to help expand audiences. I'm introducing my audience to a new podcast that I think that they'll find value in, which is very important. And additionally, it's usually a swap. She'll drop my show in her feed, allowing her audience to experience what we do, and audiences grow on both sides. So Linz and I put together a show called Feed Drops, and it started off a little different than it is going to proceed with today. And I did the first episode coming back off of a short 2-year hiatus. I know. And I covered Gavin Newsom's podcast, which is entitled This is Gavin Newsom. He was interviewing Ezra Klein. And I was pleasantly surprised. I'm not here to talk about politics, but the show was a lot better than I had anticipated and what I had heard it was. But we're consuming this content and we're rating across multiple categories and assigning scores and then giving an overall score of what that show is. Now, our hopes of doing this is to create a piece of content that's going to help other podcasters go, oh, I need to bump up my audio quality a little bit, or I need to tighten up my editing a little bit, because they're learning from our ranking and reviewing other shows. Number two, it's going to introduce their show to our audience. It's going to provide backlinks to their show. Hopefully, it will help their show grow. And we're doing this to help the podcasters grow that are, I don't want to say underserved or underrepresented, but if you go to any podcast player and open it up, I bet you're going to see Joe Rogan up there as a suggested podcast. And podcast players do that because they want consumers consuming content in their app. So they want to show you the biggest, best shows. It's hard to find independent podcasts. And we do a lot of research in finding these shows that I've never heard about. I'm assuming the majority of the audience has never heard about. And we're ranking and reviewing. Now, before you get too concerned, if you scored less than 6.0, we're going to send you some constructive criticism. We're not going to air that. And that's just, in our opinion, doing you a solid. If audio quality isn't there and the edits aren't great and it's just, there's a lot of room for improvement, we want to help you improve that, not just throw you under the bus, for lack of a better term. But Feed Drops is revamped. It has a newsletter right here on Substack. If you're listening on Substack, if you're listening elsewhere, there will be links in the show notes to this once the live has concluded. And we're calling podcasters. If you are a podcaster, there will be a link in the show notes, or you can just reach out to us to a web form where you can submit your show. We've already had a few months worth of content submitted. The response has been a lot better than we had anticipated, but we want to help podcasters with their momentum and their momentum to growth. And that's why I'm talking about this today. And you know what? I think we're just going to leave it there. Podcast discovery has always been an issue. Yes, you're discoverable on, 20 plus players these days. However, a lot of smaller players don't ingest everything. And if the podcaster is not submitting their show's not going to appear in search. But we want to provide another avenue, number one, to introduce podcasts to people, and number two, help podcasters produce better and better content. So that is all I have for you today. Sorry for the missed intro and outro. A meeting ran over. No excuses. We'll see you next week.